The woman who would one day refuse to kill a vampire king first met him across a conference table in a vault beneath Geneva, where the air smelled of old stone and newer fear. Olivia Hartford had been briefed on protocol, on the elaborate courtesies required when addressing the immortal court, on the careful dance of words that kept mortals breathing in rooms like these. She had nodded through all of it, memorized the honorifics and the bowing angles, and then walked into the vault with her shoulders square and her government-issued briefcase in hand, ready to do what her superiors believed was impossible: negotiate a trade agreement between the human European Union and the Court of Endless Night. The vault had been chosen as neutral ground. Neither fully human nor fully belonging to the vampires who had revealed themselves to the world only 5 years prior, it sat in that uncertain space where both sides could pretend they held equal power. The lighting was deliberately dim, a concession to vampire comfort that made the human delegation squint at their papers. Olivia's eyes adjusted quickly. She'd always been good in the dark. 7 people sat on the human side of the table. Olivia was the youngest by 2 decades, the least experienced by every measure that mattered to diplomatic corps, and the only one who had not paled when the vampire delegation entered. They came in a sweep of white and shadow, 5 figures who moved with the unsettling grace of predators who had long ago forgotten what it meant to be prey. Their skin held the luminous pallor of moonlight on snow, bloodless and beautiful in a way that made the hindbrain whisper warnings. Their hair ranged from silver to pure white, even on faces that appeared young. But it was their eyes that made hardened diplomats look away, that made the head of the human delegation suddenly find his notes fascinating. Olivia looked. She looked at the 4 courtiers who flanked their king, at the elegant menace in their stillness, at the way they seemed to occupy space differently than living things should. She looked at the woman in midnight blue whose beauty was so sharp it felt like a weapon. She looked at the man whose white hair fell past his shoulders and whose smile showed just the tips of fangs. Then she looked at the vampire king, and something in the air changed. Raven Icarus was not the oldest vampire in existence, though at 8 centuries he might as well have been to mortal reckoning. He did not sit so much as occupy his chair, his posture perfect without being stiff, his hands resting on the table with casual confidence. He wore black that probably cost more than Olivia's annual salary, tailored to a body that moved like water and struck like lightning according to the intelligence reports. His hair was white as bone, swept back from a face that would have been devastating even without the supernatural beauty that came with vampirism. High cheekbones, a mouth that curved with what might have been amusement or might have been hunger, a jaw that suggested both aristocracy and violence. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were amber, true amber, the color of honey held up to sunlight, or old whiskey in crystal glasses. They should have been warm. Instead, they were the coldest thing in the room, and Olivia watched something flicker behind them when her gaze met his. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of some kind she did not yet understand. The head of the human delegation was speaking, his voice tight. Lord Commissioner Davies had been chosen for his experience, his record of successful negotiations, his ability to remain calm under pressure. He was failing at all 3. His papers rustled in his shaking hands. His words came too quickly, formal phrases about mutual benefit and historical cooperation that meant nothing and fooled no one. The vampire courtiers did not bother hiding their contempt. One of them, the woman in midnight blue, let out a soft laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Raven himself said nothing. He simply watched Davies with those amber eyes, unblinking, until the commissioner's voice faltered mid-sentence. The silence stretched. Davies looked down at his papers, then at his hands. Anywhere but at the vampire king who had not moved, who had not spoken, who nonetheless dominated the room through sheer presence. Olivia felt something crack open in her chest, some combination of frustration and second-hand embarrassment, and the sudden wild certainty that if someone did not do something, this entire negotiation would collapse before it began. 5 years of careful diplomacy, of proving that humans and vampires could coexist, of building toward this moment, all of it about to crumble because a roomful of experienced diplomats could not hold eye contact with an apex predator. She set down her pen. The small click of metal on wood sounded loud in the strained quiet. "This is ridiculous," she said. Every human head swiveled toward her. Davies made a small choking sound. His deputy, a pinched woman named Winters, hissed something that was probably meant to be a warning but came out as a wheeze. Olivia ignored them. She looked directly at Raven Icarus, at those amber eyes that had made her superior officer forget how to complete a sentence, and she smiled. "You're doing it on purpose," she said. "The staring. You're trying to scare us." One of the vampire courtiers moved, a rustle of fabric and the whisper of a threat beginning. Raven stopped him with the barest lift of one pale hand. Am I succeeding?" His voice was midnight in old books, cultured and cold. "Obviously," Olivia said, "but it's a parlor trick. You want us nervous, make us sign something stupid, then spend the next decade telling everyone humans are too weak to deal with your kind as equals." She leaned back in her chair, affecting a casualness she did not entirely feel, but would die before revealing. "I get it. Good strategy. But maybe we could skip the posturing and actually get something done?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Literally. Olivia could see her breath now, small clouds of condensation that revealed just how much the vampires had been holding back their natural cold. Davies made a sound like a dying pigeon. The vampire courtiers went very, very still in the way that meant violence was being considered. Raven Icarus tilted his head, a movement too fluid to be human. "You believe I am posturing. I think you've spent centuries perfecting intimidation, and humans just handed you a room full of people already half terrified. I don't blame you for taking advantage." Olivia met his eyes steadily. "But I'm here to negotiate a trade agreement, not to play dominance games with someone who's going to out-apex predator me, no matter what I do. So either we can sit here while you psychologically demolish my boss, or we can do something more interesting." "Interesting?" Raven said the word like he was tasting it. "Such as?" The idea hit her fully formed and completely insane, the kind of thing that would end her career and possibly her life. Olivia Hartford had always had a gift for those. "Staring contest," she said. "You and me. Right now." The silence that followed had texture and weight. Somewhere in it, Davies might have whimpered, "You challenge me to a staring contest." Raven's expression had not changed, but something in his voice had. Amusement, maybe. Or disbelief. "I do." Olivia planted her elbows on the table. "You're going to win, obviously. You don't have to blink. But at least it'll be honest, and maybe everyone can relax after we establish that, yes, Vampire King. Very scary, very powerful. We're all duly impressed." "Olivia," Davies managed, strangled. "This is not, you cannot." "Lord Commissioner," the vampire in midnight blue purred. "Let the child play." Something flashed in Olivia's peripheral vision, too quick to track. Then Raven was leaning forward, closing the distance across the table, until Olivia could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could feel the unnatural cold that radiated from his skin. "If I win," he said softly, "what do I claim as prize? You get to feel smug, and we proceed with negotiations in good faith." Olivia did not let herself lean back, though every instinct screamed at her to put distance between herself and the predator close enough to strike. "If I win, which I won't, you stop deliberately terrorizing my delegation, and we have an actual conversation about trade routes. And if you bore me, I end this negotiation, and your delegation goes home with nothing." His eyes held hers. "Are you willing to risk that, Olivia Hartford?" He knew her name. Of course he did. The Vampire King would have received the same briefings, the same dossiers. But hearing it in his voice made something shiver down her spine. "Yes," she said. Raven smiled then, a real smile that showed the sharp edges of his fangs. "Very well. On 3. One of his courtiers counted. Olivia did not look away to see which one. At 3, she locked her gaze to Raven's and forgot to breathe. She had expected many things. The inhuman beauty, yes, she had prepared for that. The cold intelligence that looked out from those amber eyes, the weight of 8 centuries bearing down on her through a stare that had probably killed people who met it wrong. What she had not expected was the loneliness. It lasted only a second, that unguarded moment when he thought she would look away like everyone else, and he could continue being the untouchable Vampire King. Then his expression smoothed into cool amusement, but Olivia had already seen. Something broken, something that had learned to hide. She kept her eyes on his. The seconds ticked past. Her eyes began to burn with the need to blink, then to water. The vault stayed silent except for the barely there sound of human breathing. The vampires, of course, did not breathe unless they chose to. 30 seconds. Olivia's vision started to blur at the edges. She focused on a single point, the slight variation in color near his pupil where amber darkened to rust. 45 seconds. Her eyes were streaming now, tears cutting tracks down her cheeks. Her lungs ached. She had forgotten to breathe and suddenly gasped, but did not blink, did not look away. 1 minute. Raven Icarus had not moved, had not blinked, did not need to blink, would never need to blink because he was dead and alive and beyond such mortal necessities. His expression remained neutral, merely curious, as if he were studying an unexpected insect. But his eyes had stopped being cold. 1 minute, 15 seconds. Olivia's entire face hurt. Her eyes burned like someone had thrown sand in them. Her vision had narrowed to a tunnel, the amber of his gaze filling her entire world. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Raven Icarus blinked. The room exploded into noise. The human delegation made sounds of shock and confusion. The vampire courtiers surged forward, words in languages Olivia did not recognize, fury and disbelief in every syllable. The woman in midnight blue actually hissed, the sound inhuman and sharp. Olivia slumped back in her chair, blinking rapidly, pressing her palms to her streaming eyes. Holy hell, she managed. That hurt. When she lowered her hands, Raven was standing. His courtiers had moved to flank him, protective and predatory. The temperature had dropped again, cold enough that frost formed on the edges of the table. "Congratulations," Raven said. His voice gave nothing away, cool and controlled. "You have won. Let us negotiate." Then he swept from the room, his delegation following like pale shadows, and Olivia was left with 6 stunned human diplomats and the growing suspicion that she had done something far more significant than win a ridiculous staring contest. Davies found his voice first. "You're fired." "Sir, no, absolutely not. I don't care who your uncle is or what strings he pulled to get you on this delegation. You do not challenge the Vampire King to a... He seemed unable to complete the thought. "Staring contest," Winters supplied, her voice acid. She challenged an 800-year-old apex predator to a staring contest. "And won," Olivia pointed out. "No one wins against the Vampire King." This came from another delegate, a man named Morrison who had barely spoken since they arrived in Geneva. No one even holds his gaze that long. Whatever just happened, it was not a victory. But they were wrong, Olivia thought. She had seen it. The exact moment when Raven's eyes closed, when his expression flickered with something too fast to name before smoothing back to neutrality. He had blinked. She had won. She just had no idea why he had let her. The vampire delegation returned an hour later, after Davies had filled the time alternating between trying to fire Olivia and desperately rehearsing opening statements he clearly did not expect to use. When the vault door opened, every human jumped. Raven entered alone. No courtiers, no midnight blue menace, no flanking shadows. Just the Vampire King in his expensive black suit, moving with that terrible grace, his white hair catching the dim light. He carried a folder, cream-colored and embossed with a seal Olivia did not recognize. He set it on the table in front of Davies. "The trade routes you requested. Access to 3 major shipping lanes through our territory, tariff reductions on medical supplies and technology, and a cultural exchange program." His amber eyes swept the human delegation, lingering for just a moment on Olivia. "All the things you came here hoping to negotiate, but were too frightened to ask for." Davies stared at the folder like it might bite him. "I don't understand." "Your junior delegate made a fair point. Posturing wastes time." Raven pulled out a chair and sat, the movement economical. "These are our terms. They are generous. Review them, suggest amendments if you find them untenable, and let us proceed like the civilized beings we both claim to be." For the next 4 hours, they negotiated. Or rather, Davies and his senior staff negotiated while Olivia took notes and tried not to feel the weight of Raven's attention every time it turned toward her, which was often, too often. His gaze touched her like a physical thing, cold and assessing, and something else she could not name. The vampire's terms were indeed generous, almost suspiciously so. Access to trade routes that would cut shipping times by weeks, technology exchanges that would benefit both species, cultural programs that might, over time, ease the fear that had defined human-vampire relations since the revelation. "Why?" Davies finally asked, suspicion overwhelming his fear. "Why offer so much?" Raven was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, he looked directly at Olivia. "Because someone looked at me without flinching and suggested we might accomplish more through honesty than through fear. I find myself curious if she was correct." The words landed in Olivia's chest like stones. They signed preliminary agreements as dawn approached. The vampires would need to leave soon, retreat to whatever dark places they slept through the killing sunlight. Raven stood, buttoning his jacket with casual precision. His courtiers had returned at some point, materializing from shadows, ready to escort their king to safety. "We will reconvene in 1 week," Raven said, "to finalize terms and begin implementation." 1 week, Davies agreed, his voice still uncertain but no longer quite so afraid. "Yes, we'll be ready." Raven turned to leave, then paused. He looked back at Olivia, and this time there was no mistake. The cold had left his eyes, replaced by something that might have been warmth if she were foolish enough to believe a vampire king capable of such a thing. "Well played, Miss Hartford," he said quietly. "I look forward to our next meeting." Then he was gone, and Olivia was left wondering why his words sounded less like a compliment and more like a promise. She dreamed of amber eyes that night, of cold hands and colder loneliness, of a man who had learned to make the world look away. She woke at 3 in the morning in her Geneva hotel room, with her heart racing and the certain knowledge that she had seen something she was not supposed to see, that in those 90 seconds of unbroken eye contact, Raven Icarus had revealed a truth he usually kept hidden. She also woke to a message on her encrypted phone, just 3 words from a number that should not exist, that her government-issued device should not have been able to receive. "You saw me." Olivia stared at the screen until the display went dark, then got up and poured herself a drink from the minibar. Her hands shook slightly. She told herself it was adrenaline, aftermath of the day's intensity, nothing to do with the way her pulse jumped at those 3 words. She did not go back to sleep. The week passed in a blur of paperwork and debriefings, and Davies trying repeatedly to have her removed from the delegation. Her uncle, a deputy minister with more pull than Davies expected, shut down each attempt. Olivia suspected Uncle Marcus had his own reasons for wanting her to continue, reasons that had nothing to do with her negotiating skills and everything to do with whatever complex political game he was playing in Parliament. She had stopped trying to understand his machinations years ago. She did not receive any more messages from impossible numbers. She told herself she was not disappointed. The second meeting convened in the same vault, but the atmosphere had shifted. The human delegation entered with shoulders less hunched, with eyes that could almost meet vampire gazes without flinching. The vampire courtiers seemed less inclined toward casual menace, their movements still predatory but no longer quite so threatening. Raven arrived last as before. This time Olivia was ready for the impact of his presence, the way the air seemed to crystallize around him. She kept her expression neutral, professional. She absolutely did not think about cold hands, or lonely eyes, or 3-word messages that felt like secrets. His gaze found hers immediately. He inclined his head, a gesture so slight anyone not watching would have missed it. Olivia's pulse kicked up despite herself. The meeting proceeded smoothly. Too smoothly. Terms that should have required weeks of back and forth were agreed upon within hours. Tariff structures, shipping schedules, cultural exchange logistics, all of it fell into place with suspicious ease. Davies looked increasingly bewildered, like a man who had braced for a fight only to find his opponent handing him the victory. During a break in negotiations, Olivia stepped out into the corridor for air. The vault felt too small suddenly, too full of supernatural attention that kept sliding toward her when it should have been focused on trade agreements. She had been standing there for perhaps 2 minutes when the temperature dropped, and she knew without turning that she was no longer alone. "You should not wander off alone," Raven's voice came from behind her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. "Geneva is dangerous for humans after dark." I'm in a secure facility surrounded by guards. Olivia turned to face him. This close, she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. I think I'll survive. Perhaps? He studied her with those amber eyes, no longer cold now, but burning with something that made her breath catch. You are not what I expected, Olivia Hartford. Neither are you. The words came out before she could stop them, honest and foolish. You blinked that day. You didn't have to. Something flickered across his face. You are certain? Yes. She held his gaze, searching for that glimpse of truth she had seen before. You blinked on purpose. You let me win. I want to know why. Raven was silent for a long moment. The hallway stretched empty in both directions, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the distant sound of voices from the vault. They stood in a pocket of cold and quiet, predator and prey, neither moving. 800 years, he finally said, his voice softer than she had heard it. 800 years of making people look away, of being so terrifying, so other, that even my own kind cannot hold my eyes for long. He lifted one pale hand, not reaching for her but hovering in the space between them, as if testing whether she would flinch. And then, a human girl with bureaucratic credentials and more courage than sense looked at me like I was just a man across a table, like I was not a monster to be feared, but simply someone to be seen. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. So you let me win. So I blinked. His hand dropped. Because no one had tried so hard to truly see me in more years than you have been alive, and I wanted... He stopped, something like surprise crossing his features, as if he had not meant to say so much. Wanted what? Olivia asked quietly. To see what would happen, Raven finished. But his eyes told a different truth, one about loneliness and the ache of being feared for so long that being seen felt like coming home. They stood there in the corridor, the vampire king and the junior diplomat, suspended in a moment that would change everything. Olivia knew she should step back, should return to the meeting, should remember all the reasons why this was dangerous and foolish and completely inappropriate. Instead, she smiled. I'm glad you did. Raven's expression transformed. The cool mask slipped, replaced by something raw and wondering and almost fragile. So am I. Then the vault door opened and voices spilled into the corridor, and Raven was moving away, putting appropriate distance between them before anyone could see. His face smoothed back into regal neutrality, the vampire king once more. But for just a moment before he turned, Olivia saw the truth in his eyes. He had been alone for a very long time. And she had somehow, impossibly, made him feel less alone. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a cascade of meetings and late-night calls and carefully worded documents that would reshape human-vampire relations for generations. The preliminary agreement became a full treaty. Davies stopped trying to fire Olivia and started grudgingly accepting that she had somehow become essential to the process. Raven's courtiers grew accustomed to her presence, though the woman in midnight blue still watched her with unconcealed suspicion. Raven himself remained carefully proper during official meetings, all business and formal courtesies, but the messages continued, arriving on her encrypted phone at odd hours from numbers that should not exist. The trade route through Carpathian territory will save human merchants 3 weeks and countless lives. Your suggestion was sound. Your delegation's cultural advisor is an idiot. True vampire history does not include sparkling skin or romantic brooding in forests. I find I look forward to these meetings more than I should. Olivia responded to each one, trading information and dry observations and, increasingly, something that felt dangerously like friendship. She learned that Raven had a cutting wit buried under his regal formality, that he read voraciously in 17 languages, that he had been a scholar before he had been turned, back when the world was smaller and crueler, and humans burned people for far less than drinking blood. She learned that he hated the politics of his position, but shouldered them anyway, because someone needed to guide his people into this new age of revelation. She learned that he missed the sun with an ache that never faded, that he had standing orders to kill anyone who threatened the fragile peace between their species, and that he had not allowed anyone to see him unguarded in over 200 years. Until her. Until a staring contest in a Geneva vault when a human woman had refused to look away. The realization hit Olivia late one night as she sat in her hotel room reviewing documents. She was falling for him. For an 800-year-old vampire king who could kill her without effort, who belonged to a species that still terrified most of humanity, who lived in a world of darkness and blood and ancient power she could barely comprehend. She was falling for Raven Icarus, and it was the most foolish thing she had ever done. Her phone buzzed, another message from another impossible number. "I need to see you, alone, tomorrow night. I will send a car." Olivia stared at the screen, her heart in her throat. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. This was how humans died in all the stories, lured away to private meetings with vampires who saw them as food or entertainment or prey. Her government training had entire sections on avoiding exactly this scenario. She typed back, "Where?" "Somewhere I can speak freely. Somewhere I can be certain we are not observed. Please, Olivia, trust me." She should say no. Should report this to Davies, to her handlers, to someone who could make the sensible decision she was clearly incapable of making. Should remember that she was a human diplomat negotiating with a dangerous predator, not a woman receiving messages from someone who might feel the same impossible pull she did. Olivia Hartford had never been particularly good at should. "Okay," she typed, "tomorrow night." The car arrived at midnight, a black luxury sedan with windows too dark to see through. The driver was vampire, pale and silent, holding the door for her with careful courtesy. Olivia climbed in before she could change her mind, before fear or common sense could catch up with her. They drove for an hour, out of Geneva and into the mountains, climbing roads that grew narrower and darker until civilization was just a glow on the distant horizon. The car finally stopped before a gate set into stone. Iron bars worked in patterns that hurt to look at too long. The gates swung open silently, and they continued up a private drive to a house that was less house and more fortress, all stone and narrow windows and the weight of centuries. Raven stood waiting on the steps, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him. Dark trousers and a white shirt, no jacket, his pale hair loose around his shoulders. He looked younger like this, less the ancient king, and more like what he must have been before vampirism stole his life. Beautiful and dangerous and utterly inhuman. He opened her door himself, dismissing the driver with a gesture. "Thank you for coming." "You said please," Olivia replied, climbing out. "I figured that was significant for a vampire king." It was. He led her up the steps and into the house, through halls lined with art that probably belonged in museums and over floors that had been walked by royalty, both living and dead. "This is my home. My true home, not the court residences where I conduct official business. No one outside my inner circle knows of this place." "So why bring me here?" Olivia asked, though she thought she knew, thought she understood what it meant that he had revealed this secret, this vulnerability. Raven stopped in a room that was part library, part sanctuary, walls lined floor to ceiling with books, a fire burning in a massive hearth despite the lack of chill. He stood before the flames, his back to her, tension in every line of his body. "Because I need to tell you the truth," he said quietly, "before this goes any further, before you commit to something without understanding what it means." Olivia's mouth went dry. What truth? He turned to face her, and his eyes were the color of amber in firelight, burning and ancient and full of a grief so deep it made her chest ache. "The last person who looked at me the way you do, who saw past the monster to whatever remains of the man she was mortal, human, fragile in the way your kind are fragile." His voice roughened. "Her name was Elena, and because I loved her, because I allowed myself to be seen, my enemies killed her to hurt me. They made me watch. It took 3 days." The words hung in the air like poison. Olivia felt them sink into her skin, understanding blooming terrible and complete. "That was 200 years ago. Raven continued, "and I swore I would never allow it to happen again, that I would be the untouchable vampire king, too terrible to love, too dangerous to approach. I would make everyone look away so that no one could be used against me. No one could die for the crime of seeing my heart." He crossed the space between them, moving with that impossible speed, stopping close enough that she could feel the cold of him, could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. "And then you challenged me to a staring contest and looked at me like I was just a man, and I felt something I thought I had buried with Elena's body. I blinked because I wanted to see what you would do with victory. I sent you messages because I could not stop thinking about you. I brought you here because you deserve to know the danger you are in simply by knowing me." Olivia's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. "You're telling me this to scare me away. I'm telling you this because you should be scared, because humans who get close to me die, Olivia. Because my world is blood and politics and enemies who have waited centuries for an opening. Because you are that opening, and they will see it, and they will come for you." His hands lifted, hovering near her face but not touching, as if he did not trust himself. "I am telling you this because I am falling for you, and I need you to understand what that means." "It means someone might try to kill me," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because loving you makes me a target." "Yes. Okay." She reached up and caught his cold hands in her warm ones, ignoring the way he tensed, the way his eyes widened. "Tell me about Elena. Tell me what she was like. Tell me what happened." "Olivia, if you're going to push me away to keep me safe, the least you can do is let me understand why. Who was she?" Raven stared at her for a long moment, something like pain and wonder warring in his expression. Then, slowly, carefully, he laced his fingers through hers and led her to the chairs before the fire. He told her about Elena through the long hours of night, about the merchant's daughter who had stumbled into vampire territory and stayed despite the danger, despite every rational reason to run. About how she had laughed at his attempts at intimidation and called him a dramatic fool who read too much Gothic poetry. About how she had held his gaze without flinching and told him his eyes were beautiful, that they reminded her of her father's best whiskey. About how they had loved in secret for 3 years, until a rival lord discovered the truth and decided the best way to hurt the untouchable vampire king was through his human heart. About the 3 days it took her to die, and the century it took him to feel anything other than rage and guilt after. By the time he finished, dawn was approaching, the sky outside beginning to lighten with the promise of killing sun. Raven's hands had tightened on Olivia's during the telling, his cold fingers gripping hers like she might disappear if he loosened his hold. "I burned them all," he said quietly. "Everyone involved in her death. I hunted them across continents and made them understand exactly what it cost to touch what was mine. But it did not bring her back, and I learned that love for my kind is a weakness enemies will exploit without mercy." Olivia looked at their joined hands, pale and tan, dead and alive, impossible and inevitable. "Do you regret loving her?" "Every day." His voice broke on the words. "And not at all. Which makes me the worst kind of fool, because here I sit, knowing exactly how this ends, and I cannot make myself let you go." "Then don't." Olivia met his eyes, seeing past the cold to the grief and longing and desperate loneliness beneath. "I'm not Elena. I'm not a secret to be hidden away. I'm a diplomat with government protection and training and resources. I can be careful. We can be careful. It will not be enough." But his hands tightened on hers anyway, betraying the truth he did not want to speak. "Maybe not." Olivia smiled, small and sad and certain. "But I saw you, Raven. In that vault, during our ridiculous staring contest, I saw past the vampire king to whoever you really are. And I can't unsee that. I don't want to unsee it." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked exactly what he was. An 800-year-old man who had been alone far too long and did not know how to stop being afraid. When he opened them again, they were burning with something fierce and protective and almost desperate. "If you stay, if you pursue this, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. But my enemies are old and patient and cruel, and they will see you as I do as the one thing in this world that could make me vulnerable." "I know." Olivia squeezed his hands. "I'm staying anyway." Raven made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, and then he was pulling her close, wrapping her in cold arms that felt like the safest place in the world. She felt his face press against her hair, felt the unnatural chill of him seeping into her skin. "You are the bravest fool I have ever met," he whispered against her temple. "I beat you in a staring contest," Olivia pointed out, her voice muffled against his chest. "I think we established my foolishness that day." He did laugh then, the sound rough with disuse but genuine. When he pulled back to look at her, his eyes were still ancient and inhuman, but no longer quite so cold. "I let you win." "I know," Olivia said and smiled. "I still wonder why." "Because you deserve to win something." His hand lifted to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture achingly gentle. "Because in 800 years, you were the first person brave enough or foolish enough to try. Because when you looked at me, I wanted to be the man you saw rather than the monster I have become." Olivia reached up and cupped his cold face in her warm hands, feeling him go still beneath her touch. "You're not a monster, Raven. You're just someone who has been hurt badly enough and long enough that you forgot any other way to be." He turned his face into her palm, eyes closing. "You see too much. You let me see. That day, in the vault, you could have kept your mask up, kept being the terrifying vampire king. But you blinked. And I saw." She felt his jaw tense under her hands. "I've been thinking about that. About what it must cost you, hiding all the time. Never letting anyone close enough to see the grief." "It is easier than the alternative," he said roughly. "Easier than watching people I love die because they committed the crime of caring for a monster. I'm not going to die. You cannot promise that." "No," Olivia agreed, "but neither can anyone else. Humans die, Raven. We're fragile and temporary, and we die in car accidents or from disease or from simple, stupid, bad luck. You can't protect me from mortality, but you can choose whether to spend whatever time we have being alone or being together." He opened his eyes, and they were blazing now, amber fire that threatened to consume her. "If I do this, if I allow myself to love you, I will be unbearable. Controlling and protective and paranoid about every threat. I will want to know where you are at all times. Will surround you with guards you cannot see. Will investigate everyone who comes near you. I will be the worst parts of vampire possessiveness wrapped around you like a cage." "Okay," Olivia smiled. "We'll work on healthy boundaries. But I'd rather deal with an overprotective vampire boyfriend than watch you be alone for the next 800 years. "Boyfriend," Raven repeated, and something like wonder crossed his face. "Is that what you want? This fragile, impossible thing between us?" "Yes," she said it simply, certainly, the truth of it settling into her bones. "I want you. All of you, grief and paranoia, and 800 years of baggage included. I want to know what makes you laugh and what you were like before you were turned and how you take your blood. I want more midnight messages and conversations in vaults and being the person you let see your heart." "My heart stopped beating in 1224, he said, but his hands had come up to cover hers, holding her palms against his face. "You know what I mean." "I do." He turned to press a kiss against her palm, his lips cold but gentle. "I want this too. More than I should, more than is wise. I want to wake at sunset knowing you will be there. I want to show you my world, the beauty and the horror of it. I want centuries with you instead of decades, and I know that is the most selfish thing I could possibly want because it would mean turning you, changing you, stealing your mortality." Olivia's breath caught. She had known intellectually that this was where the conversation would lead eventually, that loving a vampire meant confronting the question of turning, of choosing between a human lifetime and an immortal one. But hearing him say it, hearing the want and guilt in his voice, made it viscerally real. "Is that something you would want?" she asked carefully. "For me to become like you?" "Yes?" The word came out rough, almost angry. "And I hate myself for it. Elena never wanted to turn. She loved the sun and growing things in the ordinary progression of human life. I loved her enough to let her stay mortal, to accept that I would have only decades with her. But you..." His hands tightened. "With you, I find myself wanting forever. I want to keep you, to make you mine, in the way that would let us have centuries instead of years. I want to be selfish and monstrous, and to hell with what you might lose." "What would I lose?" Olivia asked quietly. "If I chose to turn?" Raven pulled back, his expression bleak. "The sun, the warmth of it on your skin, the simple joy of a bright summer day. You would burn in minutes of direct exposure, die in less than an hour. The taste of food, the pleasure of a good meal. Blood sustains us, but nothing else holds flavor. The easy comfort of your own kind. Humans would fear you, and other vampires would see you as a newborn, weak and untested. Your family, your friends, you would have to walk away or risk exposing them to our world. He stood, pacing before the fire like a caged thing. You would gain immortality, yes, strength and speed and senses beyond human reckoning, power enough to stand in our world without being prey. But you would lose your humanity, Olivia, the essential warmth that makes you who you are, and I would be the one who took it from you. Olivia watched him pace, seeing the guilt etched into every line of his body. You're assuming I would regret it. Most do, eventually. He stopped, silhouetted against the fire. The ones who turn for love wake decades later and realize what they have lost. The ones who turn for power discover immortality is a cage as much as a gift. I have seen it happen too many times, have held too many newborns as they screamed through the transition and emerged less than they were. But you don't regret it, Olivia guessed, being what you are. Raven was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I regret many things, but not the turning itself. I was dying when my sire found me, bleeding out in a scholar's library while raiders burned the monastery around me. She offered me a choice, die with my books and my human limitations, or live forever with power enough to protect what I loved. I chose life. I have never wished otherwise. Then stop projecting your guilt onto me. Olivia stood, crossing to him. I'm not Elena. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from hard choices. If I decide to turn, it will be because I chose it, with full knowledge of what I am gaining and losing. And if I decide to stay human, to take whatever years we can have and accept that they will be shorter than either of us wants, that will be my choice too. She took his cold hands again, grounding them both. But right now, this moment, I choose you, however that looks, however long it lasts. I'm choosing this impossible thing between us because when I looked into your eyes, I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving. And I'm too stubborn to let something like mortality stand in the way of that. Raven stared at her, and Olivia saw the moment something in him broke open, some last defense crumbling. He pulled her close, his arms iron strong and freezing cold, and she felt him shake against her. I do not deserve you, he whispered into her hair. Probably not, Olivia agreed, her voice muffled against his chest. But you're stuck with me anyway. They stayed like that as the sun rose outside, Raven holding Olivia like she might disappear, both of them pretending not to notice the dawn light beginning to creep across the floor. When it reached the edge of his shadow, he reluctantly pulled away. I need to sleep. The sun. I know. Olivia stepped back, already missing his cold presence. Will you take me back to Geneva? My driver will see you home. His hand lifted, hesitating, then cupped her cheek. Thank you for seeing me, for staying, for being brave enough to choose this. Olivia turned her face into his palm. Thank you for letting me. He walked her to the door where the black sedan waited, the driver already in position. The sky was lightening rapidly now, pink and gold spreading across the horizon. Beautiful, deadly to the man standing in the shadow of his doorway. Tonight, Raven said. I will call you tonight. We have much to discuss. Tonight, Olivia agreed and climbed into the car. As they drove away, she looked back to see him silhouetted in the doorway, his white hair catching the last of the moonlight, his amber eyes glowing in the growing dawn. Then he stepped inside, and the door closed, and he was gone. Olivia leaned back against the seat and pressed her fingers to her lips, feeling them tremble with adrenaline and fear and something that might have been joy. She had just agreed to pursue a relationship with an 800-year-old vampire king who came with enemies and trauma and the very real possibility of getting her killed. She could not remember ever feeling more certain of a decision. The car delivered her to her hotel as the sun fully rose, Geneva coming alive around her with morning traffic and ordinary human concerns. Olivia made her way to her room, exhausted but too wired to sleep. She sat on the bed and stared at her encrypted phone, half expecting another message from an impossible number. Instead, a different message waited. From her uncle, the deputy minister who had pulled strings to get her on this delegation in the first place. "Conference call, 2 hours, mandatory. Come alone to room 847. Olivia's stomach went cold. Room 847 was not her room. It was not Davies's room or anywhere else the legitimate delegation would convene. And her uncle's messages never said come alone unless something had gone very, very wrong. She showered and changed, trying to wash away the exhaustion and the scent of old stone and wood smoke that clung to her from Raven's house. When 2 hours had passed, she made her way to the 8th floor, her government training whispering warnings she tried to ignore. The door to 847 stood slightly ajar. Olivia knocked anyway, announcing herself. "Uncle Marcus, it's Olivia. Come in." His voice familiar and warm, the same voice that had told her bedtime stories when she was small. Olivia pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was a suite, larger than her accommodations, furnished with the bland efficiency of expensive hotels. 3 people waited inside. Her uncle, looking distinguished and tired in a charcoal suit. A woman Olivia did not recognize, severe in military dress. And a man who stood by the window, his back to the room, radiating authority. "Shut the door," Marcus said quietly. Olivia shut the door. Her hand found the knife in her jacket pocket, the small illegal blade she had carried since her first posting abroad. She did not draw it. Yet. "What's this about?" Marcus gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Olivia, please. This will be difficult enough without you standing there looking ready to bolt." She sat, but only on the edge of the chair, her weight forward, ready to move. The military woman watched her with cold assessment. The man by the window still had not turned. "You have done extraordinary work these past weeks," Marcus began. "The treaty you have helped negotiate is exactly what we needed. Exactly what the world needs to move forward with human-vampire coexistence." "Thank you." Olivia kept her voice level. "But I don't think you called me here to offer congratulations." "No." Marcus leaned back, and Olivia saw the weariness in him, the weight of something that had been eating at him. "I called you here because the treaty is a lie, a beautifully crafted, politically necessary lie, but a lie nonetheless." The room tilted. Olivia felt her heart kick into overdrive, felt cold sweat break out along her spine. "What are you talking about?" The woman spoke for the first time, her voice clipped and professional. "The government has no intention of honoring the treaty terms, the trade routes, the cultural exchanges, the technology sharing. All of it is cover for military positioning. We are using the goodwill you have built to place assets deep in vampire territory, to map their strongholds and identify their leadership structure. When the time comes, we will use that information to launch a coordinated strike against every major vampire population center simultaneously." Olivia stood so fast, her chair tipped over. "You're planning genocide." "We are planning to eliminate a threat before it eliminates us." The man by the window finally turned, and Olivia recognized him. General Richard Stone, head of the European Defense Initiative, the man responsible for military strategy across the entire Union. The vampires revealed themselves 5 years ago. In that time, they have consolidated power, infiltrated our governments, and positioned themselves as indispensable to global trade and politics. They are playing a long game, Miss Hartford. They are immortal and patient and utterly inhuman, and in another generation, they will control everything that matters. "That's not true!" Olivia's voice shook with fury. "The vampires want peace. Raven King Icarus himself has been negotiating in good faith. King Icarus is 800 years old and has spent centuries perfecting the art of manipulation," Stone interrupted. "He knows exactly what he is doing, and it is working. You have fallen for the oldest trick in the book, Miss Hartford. You think because he showed you a glimpse of supposed vulnerability that makes him trustworthy. It makes him a master strategist. You don't know him. Neither do you." Stone crossed the room, his expression almost pitying. "You have known the Vampire King for a handful of weeks, seen him in carefully controlled circumstances, received messages designed to make you feel special and chosen. And it has worked exactly as he intended. You are compromised, Miss Hartford, emotionally compromised to a degree that makes you a liability to this operation." Olivia felt bile rise in her throat. "What operation? What are you talking about?" Marcus stood, moving to her side. His hand landed on her shoulder, heavy and familiar. The treaty signing. 1 week from today in Vienna, all the major players from both sides will be present. Human leaders, vampire nobility, the press, witnesses from every nation. King Icarus will attend personally, along with his entire court. It is the best opportunity we will ever have, the military woman added. Every major vampire leader in one place, with legitimate reason for heavy security presence. We strike during the ceremony itself. Daylight spectrum weapons, silver core ammunition, consecrated compounds. The building will be designed to trap them, to prevent escape once the attack begins. We will decapitate their leadership in a single blow, Stone said, and follow it with simultaneous strikes on vampire strongholds worldwide. By sunset, the vampire threat will be functionally eliminated. Olivia could not breathe, could not process what she was hearing. You want me to help you massacre them during a peace treaty signing, while they are under diplomatic protection, while they trust. Her voice broke. You want me to help you murder Raven? We want you to do your job, Stone corrected. Your real job, the one you were recruited for before you ever joined this delegation. The room spun. Olivia looked at her uncle, saw the confirmation in his eyes. Marcus? I recruited you into intelligence 4 years ago, Marcus said quietly. When you came to me wanting to join diplomatic corps, I saw an opportunity. You are brilliant, Olivia. Observant and brave and capable of thinking on your feet. You are also young enough, idealistic enough to be believable as a junior diplomat, the perfect cover for a deep insertion operative. You used me. The words tasted like ashes. From the beginning, every posting, every assignment, training, Marcus confirmed, preparing you for this, for the most important mission of your life. His hand squeezed her shoulder. I'm sorry it had to be this way. Sorry you could not know the truth from the start, but we needed someone the vampires would trust, someone they would see as genuine. We needed someone who could get close to their king. And I did such a good job of that, didn't I? Olivia laughed, the sound broken and bitter. I got so close that I fell for him, that I started believing in the possibility of real peace, that I became exactly the kind of compromised liability you are afraid of. Yes, Stone said, which is why we are having this conversation. You have 1 week to make a decision, Miss Hartford. You can help us end the vampire threat permanently, using your access to King Icarus to ensure he is present and vulnerable when we strike. Or you can refuse, in which case we will remove you from the delegation, erase all record of your intelligence work, and proceed with an agent who is more committed to humanity's survival than to a monster's smile. If you refuse, you will be confined until after the operation completes, the military woman added. For your own protection and ours. You know too much to be allowed to warn them. Olivia looked between the three of them, seeing the certainty in their faces, the conviction that they were doing the right thing, saving humanity from an existential threat, making the hard choices that had to be made. She thought about Raven holding her in the firelight, confessing his grief and loneliness, about amber eyes that had been cold for centuries until she refused to look away, about messages sent from impossible numbers and a vampire king who blinked on purpose because a human woman had tried to see him. She thought about Elena, about 3 days of dying, about enemies who killed to hurt and the weight of 800 years of learning to be alone. She thought about genocide disguised as a peace treaty, about leaders on both sides who would die believing in a future that was a lie. How long have you been planning this? She asked quietly. Since the moment the vampires revealed themselves, Stone replied. Did you truly believe we would simply accept their existence? That humanity would share the world with apex predators who see us as food? King Icarus has laws against hunting humans, Olivia said. Strict laws enforced with permanent death. No vampire under his rule can kill a human without facing execution. Laws that mean nothing when they decide to change them, when they grow tired of pretending to be civilized. Stone's expression hardened. You are young, Miss Hartford. You do not remember the chaos when they first revealed themselves, the panic, the attacks, the dozens of incidents where vampires lost control and killed innocent people. King Icarus restored order, yes, and imposed his laws, but that does not change what they are. Given time and opportunity, they will show their true nature. We cannot afford to wait for that day." Olivia stood silent, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. Help them murder the man she loved and destroy any chance of peace between their species, or refuse and watch them do it anyway while she sat locked in a room somewhere, helpless to stop it. There had to be another way. There had to be. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have 1 week," Marcus replied. "We will contact you with final operational details in 6 days. Until then, continue your work on the treaty as if nothing has changed. Maintain your relationship with King Icarus. Give him no reason to suspect anything is wrong." "You want me to lie to him for a week while you prepare to kill him?" "We want you to do your job." Stone moved to the door, their meeting apparently concluded. "Your feelings for the Vampire King are unfortunate, but ultimately irrelevant. What matters is ensuring humanity's survival. Think about that, Miss Hartford. Think about what will happen to the human race if we allow vampires to continue consolidating power. Think about your family, your friends, every person you have ever loved. Then make the right choice." He left. The military woman followed, leaving Olivia alone with Marcus. Her uncle, who had taught her to ride a bike and helped with her university applications, and recruited her into intelligence without her knowledge or consent. "I know you are angry," Marcus said quietly. "You have every right to be. But Olivia, you must understand." "Get out! Olivia, get out!" She was shaking now, fury and grief and betrayal warring in her chest. "Get out before I do something we will both regret." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, something like regret crossing his face. Then he nodded and left, the door clicking shut behind him with terrible finality. Olivia stood alone in the hotel suite, staring at nothing, her mind racing. They were going to kill him. In 6 days, during a ceremony meant to celebrate peace, they were going to slaughter Raven and every vampire who trusted enough to attend. They would use her relationship with him, her credibility, to ensure he walked into a trap. Unless she warned him. Unless she chose Raven over her own species, over the government she had served, over the uncle who raised her and the mission she had been unknowingly trained for. Unless she became the traitor they clearly expected her to be. Olivia pulled out her encrypted phone with shaking hands. No impossible numbers, no midnight messages. She would have to reach him some other way, would have to find a method of contact that was not monitored by the intelligence apparatus she had just discovered she had been part of for 4 years. But first, she needed to think. Needed to be certain this was the right choice, that she was not simply a compromised operative making emotional decisions that would doom her species. She sat on the floor, back against the bed, and tried to reason through the panic. Stone was right about one thing. She barely knew Raven. A handful of weeks, some late-night messages, one long conversation by firelight. Not enough to base this kind of decision on. Not enough to betray everything she had ever been. But she had seen his eyes, had looked into them during that absurd staring contest, and seen the loneliness, the grief, the desperate hope that someone might finally see past the monster. She had watched him blink deliberately, choosing to let her win when he could have kept his mask perfect and untouched. She had felt him shake when he held her, had heard his voice break on Elena's name, had seen 800 years of carefully controlled loneliness crack open because a human woman refused to look away. That was not manipulation. That was not strategy. That was just someone who had been alone far too long, finally allowing himself to be seen. And if she helped them kill him, if she said nothing and let the massacre proceed, she would spend the rest of her life knowing she had destroyed the most genuine thing she had ever felt. More than that, she would destroy any chance of real peace. The vampires would never trust humans again after this betrayal. They would retreat into their old ways, into viewing humans as prey and enemies. Stone's genocide would fail to eliminate them all it always did, and the survivors would be righteously furious, justified in their retaliation. The cycle of violence would never end. But if she warned Raven, if she exposed the plot and helped him survive, there would be consequences. Humanity would lose its chance at this first strike, would have to negotiate from a position of acknowledged bad faith. Olivia herself would be a traitor, hunted by her own government, never safe in the human world again. She would have to turn, would have to accept vampirism and everything it cost, because staying human would mean staying vulnerable to the government agents who would absolutely kill her for this betrayal. The sun, gone forever. Food, tasteless. Her family, lost. Her humanity, traded for immortality and the chance to build a real peace instead of a massacre. She would have to become what she feared, what humanity feared, would have to trust that Raven would help her through the transition, that centuries with him would be worth everything she lost. Olivia sat on the floor of a Geneva hotel room and made her choice. She chose truth over lies, peace over genocide, a vampire king who blinked on purpose over a government that had used her without her consent or knowledge. She chose Raven. Now she just needed to warn him without getting caught. She could not use her phone, could not risk any monitored channel. They would be watching her now, waiting to see if she would break. She needed to reach him in person, needed to get to his mountain fortress without government surveillance following. Olivia stood, her decision crystallizing into action. She grabbed her jacket and her illegal knife and the small amount of cash she kept for emergencies, left her phone on the bed, along with any other device they might track. Walked out of the hotel through the service entrance she had memorized her first day in Geneva, the one the security cameras did not quite cover. She had no idea how to reach Raven's home without the address, had no way to contact him except through channels that were compromised. But she was a trained intelligence operative, whether she had known it or not, and she had learned things these past 4 years. How to disappear in a city, how to move without being followed, how to find people who did not want to be found. She started with the black sedan, the driver who had brought her back from Raven's house that morning. He would be vampire, part of Raven's retinue, loyal to his king. If she could find him, she could get a message through. It took 3 hours of careful searching, of checking parking garages and side streets near the vault where they held negotiations. She finally spotted the sedan in an underground structure, the driver sitting behind the wheel in the darkness, waiting. Patient in the way, immortals were patient. Olivia approached carefully, hands visible. The driver's head turned, inhumanly fast, his pale eyes assessing her. "Miss Hartford, you should not be here. I need to see him, Raven, King Icarus, right now. It's urgent." The driver's expression did not change. "His Majesty is resting, the sun." "I know, but this cannot wait until sunset. Please." Olivia leaned down to the window, letting him see her fear. "People are going to die if I do not reach him today. He is going to die. Please, you have to take me to him." The driver studied her for a long moment. Then he reached across and opened the passenger door. "Get in, quickly." Olivia climbed in, relief flooding through her. The car pulled out of the garage, moving through Geneva with deliberate casualness, taking random turns and doubling back on their route. Checking for tails, Olivia realized, making sure they were not followed. "You know they are watching you," the driver said quietly. "The Human Intelligence Services. They have been since the negotiations began." "I know." Olivia stared out the window, watching the city slide past. "They are planning to kill him, all of you, at the treaty signing. I need to warn him." The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. "You are certain?" "I was just told the plan by my own government. They want me to help ensure he is there, vulnerable, when they strike." She looked at the driver's profile, seeing the tension in his jaw. "I'm not going to help them, but I need to reach Raven before they realize I have broken protocol." The driver nodded once and pressed harder on the gas. They left Geneva behind, climbing into the mountains as the day wore on. Olivia watched the sun track across the sky, knowing each hour brought her closer to sunset, closer to the moment when Raven would wake and she could tell him everything. They reached the fortress as the sun hung low on the horizon, late afternoon sliding toward evening. The driver pulled up to the steps and turned to her. "He's still sleeping, but I will wake him. This cannot wait." "Thank you." Olivia climbed out, her legs shaking. She had made her choice, had burned her bridges with her own government, had committed herself to a path that would end with her death or her transformation. No going back now. The driver led her inside, through those halls lined with centuries of art, to a set of doors that radiated cold even from the outside. He knocked, a specific pattern, then opened the door and gestured her inside. The room beyond was darkness absolute, no windows, no light. Olivia stepped in blind and heard the door close behind her. Then a voice, rough with sleep, speaking from somewhere in that darkness. "Olivia, what is wrong?" "Raven," she moved toward his voice, stumbling slightly. "I'm sorry. I know you need to sleep, but I had to warn you." A hand caught her elbow, steadying her. Then, the darkness lifted slightly as Raven created a small light, a cold blue glow that illuminated his face. He looked more vulnerable than she had ever seen him, his white hair loose and tangled, his amber eyes clouded with sleep and confusion. He wore only sleep trousers, his pale chest bare, every line of him speaking to a creature woken before its time. "Warn me of what?" His free hand came up to cup her face, his expression sharpening as he took in her appearance. "You are terrified, and you came here in daylight. What has happened?" Olivia told him everything, about the hotel room and her uncle and General Stone, about the plan to use the treaty signing as a trap to slaughter every vampire leader in a single coordinated strike, about the years she had unknowingly spent training for intelligence work, about being a deep insertion operative who got too close to her target, about choosing him over everything else she had ever been. Raven went perfectly still as she spoke, his hand frozen against her cheek, his eyes burning brighter with each word. When she finally finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, "They used you. Yes? They lied to you about who you were, what you were doing, all of it. Yes? And when you discovered the truth, when they asked you to help them kill me, you chose to warn me instead." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Why?" "Because I saw you," Olivia said simply. "Because you blinked. Because I would rather be a traitor to my species than the person who helped murder someone I'm falling in love with." Raven made a sound that was not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Then he was pulling her close, his arms iron-strong around her, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shaking, felt the cold of him seeping into her bones. "You cannot go back," he said roughly. "They will kill you for this. You must know that." "I know. You have given up everything, your human life, your family, your place in your world, for me, for vampires you barely know." "I know." He pulled back, holding her at arm's length, his eyes searching hers. "Do you understand what you have done? What this means?" "It means I am yours now," Olivia said steadily. "Yours to protect or turn or do whatever you need to do to keep me alive. I have made my choice, Raven. I chose you." His expression cracked open, all the careful control shattering. "You foolish, brave, impossible woman. I do not deserve this, do not deserve you." "Good thing you let me win that staring contest then." She reached up and cupped his face, mirroring his hold on her. "We can argue about what you deserve later. Right now, we need to plan. Because in 6 days, they are going to try to kill you and every vampire leader who trusts enough to attend that signing ceremony. We need to stop them." "Or we do not attend," Raven said. "We cancel the signing, claim security concerns, and remove ourselves as targets. And prove that vampires and humans can never trust each other. That peace was always impossible." Olivia shook her head. "That is what they want, Raven. They want you afraid, want you to retreat. Then they can use your refusal as proof that vampires were never negotiating in good faith, that you were planning to betray humanity all along. They win either way." "So what do you suggest?" His hands tightened on her shoulders. "I cannot knowingly walk my people into a massacre." "No, but you can turn the trap against them." Olivia's mind raced, intelligence training kicking in despite everything. "We know their plan. We have 6 days to prepare. We warn the other vampire leaders quietly, let them know what is coming. We attend the signing, but we bring our own security, our own countermeasures. When they spring the trap, we are ready. And we reveal the human government's betrayal in front of the entire world," Raven said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "We expose them as the aggressors, as the ones who violated diplomatic protection and attempted genocide under the guise of peace." "Exactly. We take the moral high ground and hold it. We show that vampires wanted peace, and humans tried to slaughter you for it." Olivia felt the plan crystallizing. "It burns any moderate in the human government who might have worked with you, but they were going to do that anyway, by framing you as the betrayers. At least this way, the truth is known. Raven stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, the sound sharp and almost wild. You think like a vampire, ruthless and strategic and utterly committed to survival. His hands framed her face. Are you certain this is what you want? To set yourself against your entire species? I'm not setting myself against humanity. I'm setting myself against the genocidal maniacs who think slaughtering immortals is a good idea. Olivia met his eyes. Most humans do not want war, Raven. They just want to live their lives without fear. But the people in power, the generals and the intelligence officers, they see you as a threat to be eliminated. We need to show ordinary humans that there is another way. By exposing the plot and preventing the massacre. He nodded slowly. It will work. If we are careful, if we plan perfectly. But Olivia, you must understand after this, there is no going back to your human life. Ever. They will hunt you. Your own government will brand you a traitor, will do everything in their power to make you pay for this betrayal. I know. Which means you will need to turn, not someday, not decades from now, soon, before they find you, before you become a liability neither of us can afford. His eyes burned into hers. I need to know that you truly understand what you are choosing, that you are ready to become vampire, to lose the sun and your humanity and everything that makes you who you are. Olivia thought about sunlight and food and the ordinary warmth of human existence. Thought about her family, her friends, the life she had built, all of it balanced against amber eyes and cold hands and a vampire king who blinked on purpose because someone finally tried to see him. I am ready, she said. Not today, not this moment, but soon. After we stop them, after we secure the peace, then I will turn, and we will have our centuries together. Raven closed his eyes, his expression caught between pain and joy. You are certain. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He kissed her then, his cold lips gentle against hers, his hands careful on her face like she might shatter. The kiss tasted like frost and old magic, and promises that would last centuries. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Then we have work to do, he said. 6 days to prepare, to warn every vampire leader and position our own forces. 6 days to turn their trap into ours. His smile showed fangs, sharp and dangerous. Let us show the human governments what happens when they threaten the court of endless night. The next 6 days passed in a blur of planning and preparation and whispered warnings sent through channels that humans did not know existed. Raven called in debts and invoked old alliances, gathering vampire lords from across the world and briefing them on the threat. Some wanted to skip the ceremony, to retreat to their strongholds and prepare for war. Others wanted to strike first, to launch attacks on human leadership before the treaty signing could occur. Raven silenced them all with a look. We will attend, he said, his voice cold and absolute. We will attend and we will be ready. And when they spring their trap, we will show the world that vampires are not the monsters they believe, that we are capable of mercy even when mercy is not deserved. Olivia stood at his side through every meeting, every planning session. The vampire lords eyed her with suspicion and curiosity, the human who had warned them, who had betrayed her own kind to save theirs. She met their gazes without flinching, channeling that stubborn courage that had made her challenge a vampire king to a staring contest. They would accept her or not. She no longer cared. She had made her choice. On the 4th day, Raven took her to his private chambers as the sun rose, closing the door on the world outside. He looked exhausted despite his immortality, the weight of responsibility and fear pressing down on him. I want you to stay here, he said quietly, during the signing, safe in the fortress where they cannot reach you. No, Olivia, I am coming with you. She crossed to him, taking his cold hands in hers. I am the one who warned you. I am the one who can testify to the plot, who can stand in front of cameras and explain exactly what my government tried to do. You need me there, Raven, as proof, as witness, as the human who chose peace over genocide. I need you alive, he countered. They will try to kill you the moment they realize you betrayed them. You will be target number 1. Then protect me, but do not ask me to hide while you walk into danger. Olivia squeezed his hands. I am not Elena. I am not someone you need to shelter from your world. I am your partner in this, or I am nothing. Raven stared at her, conflict written across his face. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. If anything happens to you, then you will burn the world to avenge me, and I will haunt you for doing something so stupid. She pressed her face against his chest, hearing the absence of a heartbeat. But nothing is going to happen. We have planned for every contingency. We are ready. No one is ever ready for war. Good thing we are planning for peace then. He laughed despite himself, the sound rough. Peace achieved by exposing an attempted massacre? Yes, very peaceful. It is better than the alternative. Olivia pulled back to look up at him. In 2 days, we will stand in front of the world and show them what real coexistence looks like. We will survive their trap and we will offer mercy. And maybe we will build something better than either side thought possible. You are optimistic for someone planning to become a vampire. I have to be. I am in love with one of you. She stood on her toes and kissed him, feeling him melt into it, all the tension draining from his frame. We are going to survive this, Raven. We are going to build our peace and have our centuries, and make them regret ever thinking genocide was easier than coexistence. I love you, he said against her lips, the words raw and certain. I love you, and I am terrified of losing you, and I cannot decide if you are the bravest person I have ever met or simply the most foolishly stubborn. Both, Olivia said, smiling. Definitely both. They spent the last 2 days together in his fortress, planning and preparing and stealing moments of peace between the storms. Raven taught her the positions of all the security forces they would have in place, the signals to look for if things went wrong. Olivia memorized exits and protocols and the faces of the vampire lords who would stand with them. On the final night before the signing, Raven held her close as dawn approached and asked one last time if she was certain. You can still back out, can stay here safe while we handle this. No, Olivia said. I'm seeing this through, together. He nodded, accepting, and pressed his cold lips to her forehead. Then let us go make history. The treaty signing was held in Vienna, in a historic building chosen specifically for its significance. The Hall of Mirrors, where centuries of peace accords had been signed, where nations came together to end wars and build futures. The symbolism was perfect, which was exactly why Stone had chosen it, perfect for a trap. Olivia arrived with Raven in his court, moving through the building with careful awareness. The security was heavy, both human and vampire, weapons disguised as ceremony. She felt eyes tracking her from every direction, human security who knew she was supposed to be there, but radiated suspicion, vampire guards who saw her as a potential threat. She stayed close to Raven, her hand occasionally brushing his, grounding them both. The ceremony began at noon, sunlight streaming through the windows, carefully filtered sunlight, Olivia noted, wavelengths adjusted to be tolerable for vampires. More proof that the human organizers had planned for their victims' comfort right up until the moment they planned to slaughter them. Davies delivered the opening remarks, his voice steady, talking about cooperation and mutual benefit and a bright future for both species. He met Olivia's eyes once, his expression unreadable, and she wondered if he knew. If Marcus had told him about her betrayal, about the choice she had made, she would find out soon enough. The vampire delegation sat across from the human one, Raven at the center flanked by lords and ladies who had ruled for centuries. They looked regal and alien and utterly calm, as if they had no idea they were sitting in a carefully prepared killing ground. But Olivia could see the tension in Raven's shoulders, the way his amber eyes tracked every movement in the room, could see the vampire guards positioned at strategic points, ready to move the instant things went wrong. The speeches continued. Representatives from both sides spoke about historic cooperation, about building trust, about the importance of this moment. Olivia watched the clock, counting down minutes, waiting for the moment when the trap would spring. It came during the actual signing. Davies and Raven both stood, moving to the ornate table where the treaty documents waited. Cameras flashed. The crowd of diplomats and press leaned forward, watching history in the making. The two leaders reached for pens, and every window exploded inward. Glass and metal and daylight spectrum radiation flooded the room. Silver core ammunition tore through the air where vampire leaders had been sitting seconds before. Consecrated compounds burned where they splattered against walls and floor. The building's climate control shifted, pumping in air heated to temperatures meant to weaken vampire physiology. It was coordinated, overwhelming, ruthless, exactly the kind of trap military strategists spent months perfecting. And the vampires were not there. Every single vampire leader that had been sitting in chairs a moment before was simply gone, moved with that impossible speed to positions they had scouted days before. Raven appeared next to Olivia, pulling her down and shielding her with his body as bullets sang overhead. His courtiers had surrounded the other human delegates, protecting them from the friendly fire that would have killed them along with their intended targets. The attack lasted 30 seconds. When it stopped, the silence was deafening. Then Raven stood, lifting Olivia with him, turning to face the cameras that were still rolling, still broadcasting this to the world. "General Stone," he said, his voice carrying through the ruined hall, "do show yourself. I believe we have something to discuss." Stone emerged from a doorway, flanked by soldiers in full tactical gear. His expression was carefully neutral, but Olivia saw the rage beneath it, the fury of a plan gone catastrophically wrong. "King Icarus, how convenient that you moved just before the accident occurred." "Accident?" Raven smiled, showing fangs. "Is that what we're calling attempted genocide now? How diplomatic of you." He gestured to the ruined room, to the weapons still smoking in soldiers' hands. "You launched a coordinated attack on a peace summit, General, under diplomatic protection, in full view of international press. How exactly did you expect this to end?" "With you dead," Stone said flatly, "with the vampire threat neutralized before you could destroy humanity." "We were signing a treaty," Olivia said, stepping forward. Her voice shook but held steady. "We were sitting there in good faith, trying to build peace, and you attacked. You tried to murder everyone in this room just because they were not human." Stone's gaze snapped to her. "Miss Hartford, I should have known you would choose to stand with them. You were always too compromised to be useful." "I was never part of your intelligence operation," Olivia said. "You recruited me without my knowledge, trained me without my consent, and then asked me to help you commit genocide. I refused, and I warned them, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." The cameras were still rolling. Every word was being broadcast to a world that was about to have very strong opinions about what they were witnessing. "You are a traitor to humanity," Stone said. "I am someone who chose peace over mass murder." Olivia moved to stand beside Raven, feeling his cold presence at her shoulder. "You tried to slaughter them under diplomatic protection during a ceremony meant to build trust. You violated every law and custom, and you did it because you were afraid of coexistence. You wanted war because war lets you be the hero, the general who saved humanity from the monsters." "They are monsters," Stone snapped, "and you are a fool if you believe otherwise." "Perhaps." Raven's hand found Olivia's, lacing their fingers together in full view of the cameras. "But this fool warned me of your trap. This fool chose to save lives rather than take them. This fool is the reason your carefully planned massacre failed." He looked directly into the nearest camera. "The world is watching, General. Watching as you try to justify attacking a peace summit. Watching as you reveal yourself to be exactly the kind of warmonger who makes true cooperation impossible. How do you think this will play in the court of public opinion?" Stone said nothing. His jaw worked, fury and calculation warring in his expression. "You have lost," Raven continued. "Your plan failed. Your trap was sprung on empty air. And now the world knows that human leadership cannot be trusted, that they will smile and negotiate while planning murder." He paused, letting that sink in. "But I am not interested in perpetuating this cycle. I'm not interested in retaliation or revenge, despite having both right and cause." He looked at the vampire lords who had moved to surround them, all of them armed and ready, all of them more than capable of slaughtering every human in the building. "We came here to sign a treaty, to commit ourselves to peace even knowing the risks, and that is what we will do." Shock rippled through the room. One of the vampire lords, an ancient creature who ruled the Balkans, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. They tried to kill us all." "And failed," Raven interrupted, "because we were warned. Because a human woman chose to stand with us rather than participate in genocide. Because there are people on both sides who want something better than this endless cycle of fear and violence. He looked at Stone. We will sign the treaty. We will honor its terms. And we will dare humanity to prove they are capable of doing the same. You are giving us another chance, Olivia said quietly, understanding. Even after this. I am giving the humans who want peace a chance, Raven corrected. The ones like you, who will risk everything to do the right thing. The ones who do not default to violence when faced with something they do not understand. His amber eyes found hers, warm despite everything. You saw me, Olivia Hartford. You looked past the monster to the man, and you chose mercy. Let us see if your species is capable of doing the same. Stone made a sound of disgust. You think this changes anything? That one failed attempt means we will simply accept vampire rule? No one is ruling anyone, Raven said coldly. We are coexisting, learning to share a world that belongs to both our peoples, and if you cannot accept that, General, then you are welcome to spend the rest of your life in a cell for attempting to violate diplomatic protection and commit genocide. He looked at the other humans in the room, at Davies and the delegation members who stood shocked and pale. But I suspect there are enough reasonable people in your government to remove him and proceed in good faith. Are there not, Lord Commissioner? Davies stared at Raven for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. There are. Yes. I had no idea about the attack. I was told this was a legitimate ceremony, that we were here to build peace. If I had known, his voice broke. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. This is not what I wanted, not what most of us want. I believe you. Raven gestured to the ruined treaty table. Shall we try again? With honesty this time? It took another 2 hours to set up a new ceremony, this time with transparent security protocols and vampire guards flanking every position. Stone was removed in handcuffs, still protesting, still insisting he had done the right thing. His soldiers stood down, leaderless and confused, unwilling to continue a fight their general had lost. The treaty was signed as the sun set, Raven and Davies both inking their names with hands that shook slightly. The cameras captured every moment, broadcasting to a world that was learning the truth about what had almost happened, about who had tried to stop it and who had chosen peace. When it was done, when the documents were sealed and witnesses had added their signatures, Raven turned to Olivia. Walk with me. She nodded, letting him lead her out of the hall and into a garden that adjoined the building. The stars were coming out overhead, Vienna's lights glowing warm around them. It was beautiful and ordinary and utterly surreal after everything. You did it, Olivia said. You turned their trap against them and secured the peace anyway. We did it, Raven corrected. You were the one who warned me, who gave up everything to do the right thing, who stood with me in front of the world and testified against your own government. His hands found hers, cold and steady. You are the reason this worked, the reason any of it worked. I just could not let them kill you. Olivia smiled, feeling tears burn behind her eyes. Not when you blinked on purpose during that staring contest. Not when I finally understood what that meant. It meant I saw you too, Raven said softly. Saw past the junior diplomat to the brave, stubborn, brilliant woman beneath. Saw someone worth blinking for, worth falling for. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, more than I should, more than is safe, more than I have loved anyone in 200 years, and I am terrified that I will lose you the way I lost Elena. But I cannot seem to make myself regret choosing this, choosing you. You will not lose me, Olivia reached up to cup his face. Because I am staying. Because I am turning, just like we discussed. Because I want our centuries together, Raven. I want to build this peace and watch it grow and be by your side through all of it. His eyes closed, pain and joy warring in his expression. You are certain. After everything you have seen today, after watching what both our species are capable of, you still want this? I have never been more certain. She pressed her lips to his, tasting frost and old magic and the promise of forever. Turn me. Make me yours. Let us have our centuries. Raven pulled back, searching her eyes one last time. Then he nodded, accepting, and there was nothing but certainty in his expression. Not tonight. Tonight you should rest, should recover from today. But soon, before your government finds you, before you become vulnerable. His thumb brushed across her cheek. And then you will be immortal and mine and safe in ways I can protect. Safe sounds good, Olivia said, leaning into him. I think I have had enough danger for one lifetime. Then you chose the wrong man to love. But he was smiling as he said it, his amber eyes warm. My world is dangerous and political and full of enemies who will spend centuries trying to hurt me through you. Good thing I'm going to be immortal then, Olivia grinned. Let them try. I beat the Vampire King in a staring contest. I can handle whatever your enemies throw at me. Raven laughed, the sound genuinely joyful. You did not beat me. I blinked on purpose. I know. She stood on her toes to kiss him again. I still wonder why. Because you tried, he said simply. Because no one else had tried in so long that I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Because you looked at me like I was just a man across a table, and I wanted to see what would happen if I let you win. And what happened? Olivia asked, though she knew the answer. I fell in love. Raven held her close, his arms iron strong and freezing cold in the safest place she had ever been. Completely, irrevocably, with the brave, foolish human who refused to look away. They stood in the garden as night deepened around them, the Vampire King and the woman who had saved him, both of them damaged and brave and choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. Around them, the world was learning about attempted genocide and prevented massacres and the power of one person choosing mercy over murder. But in that moment, in that garden, there was only the two of them and the promise of centuries together. 3 weeks later, Olivia Hartford stood in a room deep beneath Raven's mountain fortress and prepared to die. Not permanently, not forever, but the transition required death and rebirth, a transformation that would stop her heart and restart it with different blood, different power, different everything. She was not afraid, or rather, she was terrified. But she trusted Raven to bring her through it, trusted the man who had held her through planning sessions and testimony and the endless aftermath of Vienna, who had protected her from the government agents hunting her and the vampire lords questioning her loyalty, trusted the Vampire King who had blinked on purpose because a human woman tried to see him. Last chance, Raven said quietly. He sat beside her on the bed, his cold hand in hers. If you want to back out, if you want to stay human. I do not want to back out, Olivia squeezed his fingers. I want my centuries with you. I want to build this peace we started and watch it grow. I want to wake at sunset and know you were there. I want all of it, Raven. Turn me. He studied her face for a long moment, searching for doubt or fear or regret. Then he nodded and lifted her wrist to his mouth. This will hurt. I'm sorry for that. But I will be here when you wake, and we will face eternity together. Sounds perfect, Olivia managed, and then his fangs pierced her skin and the world dissolved into cold fire. She woke 3 days later to a world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents overwhelming in their complexity. She could hear Raven breathing in the next room, despite not needing to breathe herself, could smell the old stone of the fortress and the blood that now sang through her veins, could feel the absence of her heartbeat and the presence of something else, something ancient and powerful that had been sleeping in her blood and now burned bright. Raven appeared in the doorway, moving with that impossible speed, his amber eyes blazing. Olivia, how do you feel? She took inventory. No hunger yet, though she knew it would come. No pain, just strength singing through limbs that felt new and strange and perfectly controlled. No regret, just certainty and wonder and the sudden sharp awareness that she had time now, centuries of it, forever with the man standing in front of her. I feel alive, she said, and laughed at the irony, or something like it. Raven crossed to her in a blur, pulling her close, his face pressed against her hair. You came through perfectly. The transition was clean. Your body accepted the change. You are vampire now, Olivia, mine and immortal and safe. Yours, she agreed, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. They were the same amber she remembered, but now she could see deeper, could perceive things her human eyes had missed. The flecks of gold near the pupil, the ancient grief layered beneath centuries of control, the love burning fierce and desperate, and finally unguarded. I love you, Raven said, the words raw. I loved you human, and I love you vampire, and I will love you through whatever centuries we are given. Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Thank you for blinking, Olivia said, smiling, for letting me win that staring contest, for seeing me back. Always. He kissed her then, and it was different now that she was cold too, now that she could match his strength and speed and power. They were equals in a way they had not been before, predator and predator, vampire and vampire, two immortals choosing each other against all odds. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia looked toward the window where sunset light was beginning to fade. What happens now? Now we return to Vienna, to the ongoing negotiations and the peace we built together. Raven laced his fingers through hers. Now we prove to both our peoples that coexistence is possible, that humans and vampires can not only negotiate, but love. Now we live our centuries and build something better than what came before. Sounds like a plan. Olivia squeezed his hand, feeling the cold mirror of her own new nature. Think they will be surprised? By the human diplomat who turned vampire? Absolutely. His smile showed fangs that matched hers now. Let them be surprised. Let them see what choosing love over fear looks like. Let them understand that peace is not a fantasy but a choice we make every single day. Deep thoughts for someone who let me win a staring contest. I did not let you win. I blinked because you deserved the victory. Same thing. It is not. Raven stopped, seeing her grin, and laughed. You are going to tease me about this for eternity, or not you? Probably, Olivia agreed. You did blink first. I have centuries to remind you of it. And I have centuries to remind you that you challenged a vampire king to a staring contest in the middle of delicate treaty negotiations. He pulled her close again, his amber eyes warm. We are both ridiculous, and we are going to be insufferable together. I cannot wait, Olivia said, and meant it with her whole immortal heart. They returned to Vienna a week later, appearing at the ongoing negotiations with Olivia's transformation, a visible statement about the peace they were building. The human delegation reacted with shock and some fear. The vampire lords accepted her with varying degrees of welcome, but no one could deny the symbol of it. The human who had warned them, who had chosen mercy over genocide, was now one of them. The treaty progressed, slowly, painfully, with setbacks and arguments and moments when it seemed like the whole thing would collapse. But Raven and Olivia stood firm, united, proving through their very existence that cooperation was possible. That love could bridge the gap between species, that choosing to see each other rather than the monsters they feared made all the difference. 3 months after Vienna, the full treaty was ratified by both human governments and vampire courts. Trade routes opened, cultural exchanges began. Humans and vampires started the long, slow work of learning to coexist as equals rather than predator and prey. And in a fortress in the mountains, a vampire king held his mate and marveled at the impossible thing they had built together. I keep waiting for it to fall apart, Raven admitted one evening, watching sunset paint the peaks gold and crimson. For the peace to collapse, for the enemies to resurface, for everything to prove that this was always doomed. It will not fall apart, Olivia said, leaning against his side. Not as long as we keep choosing it. Keep proving that seeing each other is more important than fearing each other. She looked up at him, at amber eyes that no longer held quite so much cold. You blinked on purpose that day. You let yourself be seen. Everything else followed from that single choice. You make it sound simple. It was simple, terrifying and risky and potentially fatal, but simple. She smiled. All you had to do was trust that someone might see you and not run away. And you did not run. His arm tightened around her. You stayed, and you saw, and you chose me even when it cost you everything. I gained everything, Olivia corrected. I gained you in centuries, and the chance to build something that matters. I would make the same choice every single time. They stood in the sunset, the vampire king and his mate, both of them scarred and healing and impossibly, stubbornly hopeful. Behind them stretched the messy, complicated reality of human vampire peace, full of setbacks and successes and the daily choice to keep trying. Ahead lay centuries of the same, of building and failing and building again, until coexistence became so normal that no one remembered a time when it seemed impossible. But in that moment, watching the sun paint the world in colors Olivia could now see with sharper vampire eyes, it all felt worth it. The sacrifice, the fear, the leap into unknown darkness, all of it worth it for the cold hand in hers and the amber eyes that had learned to be warm again. "I love you," she said quietly. I love you," Raven replied. "Thank you for looking, for refusing to look away." "Thank you for blinking," he laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I cannot believe I'm going to spend eternity being reminded of that staring contest." "You let me win on purpose. It is a very romantic gesture." It was a calculated risk that happened to pay off spectacularly. "It was you choosing to let yourself be seen." Olivia turned in his arms, cupping his cold face in her equally cold hands. "It was you being brave enough to blink first, metaphorically and literally. It was the moment everything changed." Raven stared down at her, love and wonder and lingering disbelief written across his features. "How did I get so lucky?" "You met a stubborn junior diplomat who did not know when to be appropriately terrified." Olivia stood on her toes, easier now with vampire grace, and kissed him. "And you blinked. And here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, and held her close as the sun set on their old life and rose on centuries of future. A future built on the foundation of seeing each other truly, of choosing mercy over fear, of a single blink in a Geneva vault that changed everything. They had their peace. They had their love. They had forever stretching ahead, full of possibilities neither had dared imagine before that absurd staring contest. And if Raven spent the next several centuries being gently teased about blinking first, well, it was a small price to pay for the brave, foolish human who had seen past the vampire king to the lonely man beneath, who had chosen him, transformed for him, built a better world with him. She had beaten him in a staring contest. He had blinked on purpose, and she never knew until much later that it was his way of saying he loved her before he could admit it even to himself. By then, of course, it did not matter. They had their eternity, their peace, their future. They had each other, and that was enough, more than enough, everything.